Why did God reject Cain's offering? Most people have an answer ready. Cain brought vegetables, Abel brought an animal. God wanted blood. Simple. The problem is, that answer is almost certainly incomplete. And if you look carefully at what the text actually says versus what it leaves out, you'll find the real story is far more interesting, far more disturbing, and far more relevant to your life right now than you've probably been told. Because this wasn't primarily a story about two brothers who disagreed over farm products. This was the first recorded theological confrontation in human history. It was a dispute about something that still divides people in churches today. And once you see the real argument at the center of Genesis 4, you'll start noticing it everywhere else in the Bible, in the Psalms, in the prophets, in the parables of Jesus, in Paul's letters, the same collision over and over again, all the way back to these two brothers standing before God with their offerings. By the end of this video, you're going to understand what Cain and Abel were really arguing about, why God's response makes complete sense once you see the full picture, and why this exact same conflict echoes through nearly every major crisis point in the rest of the biblical story. Let's start where we should always start, with what the text actually says. Genesis 4 opens simply enough. Adam and Eve have two sons. Cain works the ground. Abel keeps flocks. In the course of time, both brothers bring an offering to God. God looks with favor on Abel's offering. He does not look with favor on Cain's. Cain gets angry, very angry. And what follows is the first murder in human history. That's the story most people know. Here's what most people miss. Look at the word the narrator uses for what both brothers brought. In the Hebrew, both offerings are called a mincha. That word means a gift, a tribute, an offering presented to someone of higher authority. Crucially, it's a theologically neutral term. It's not a word that specifies an animal sacrifice. It's not a word that inherently requires blood. Both brothers brought a mincha, and the word itself gives no category advantage to one type over the other. So if the offering type wasn't the stated problem, the text is pointing us somewhere else. Now here's where careful reading pays off. Look at how the narrator describes each offering. When he describes Abel's gift in Genesis chapter 4:4, he includes two specific details. Abel brought the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions. Firstborn, fat portions. In the ancient world, and consistently throughout Scripture, these are the terms of priority and excellence. The firstborn was the finest. The fat portions were considered the choicest part of the animal, reserved in later Mosaic law for God alone. Abel didn't just bring something. He brought his best, and the text makes sure you notice that. Now look at Cain's offering in Genesis 4:3. He brought some of the fruits of the ground. That's all the narrator says. No qualifier, no word about first fruits, no mention of quality or priority. Just some. Now, you might say maybe Cain also brought his best, and the narrator just didn't mention it. That's possible. But here's the thing about narrative theology. What the biblical narrator chooses to include and what he chooses to omit are both communicating something. The silence around Cain's offering is not an accident. The detail around Abel's is not padding. The contrast is deliberate. The text is whispering something to us, and the rest of the Bible helps us hear it clearly. This is where we need to bring in what the New Testament authors thought this story meant, because they had access to interpretive traditions and theological instincts that are enormously helpful here. Turn to Hebrews chapter 11:4. The author of Hebrews, looking back at this exact moment in Genesis, says Abel offered his sacrifice by faith, and that by faith he was commended as righteous. That's the interpretive unlock. Abel's offering was accepted not merely because of its physical content, but because of the orientation of the person bringing it. He brought it by faith, which means, by clear implication, that Cain did not. Now let's be precise about what faith means in this context, because it's easy to reduce it to just believing something. The Greek word in Hebrews 11 is pistis, which carries the meaning of trust, reliance, and confident dependence. It's not intellectual agreement with a proposition, it's the posture of someone who has acknowledged their dependence on another's terms, provision, and way of approach. Abel's offering expressed that posture. Cain's, apparently, did not. The Apostle John sharpens this even further. In 1 John 3:12, John tells his readers not to be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. Then he asks, why did Cain murder him? And his answer is striking. Because his own deeds were evil and his brothers were righteous. Notice John isn't saying Cain snapped in a moment of jealousy. He's describing a pre-existing moral and spiritual orientation. Cain's deeds were already evil before the murder. The rejection of his offering wasn't the beginning of the problem, it was the exposure of it. This is where biblical scholars have consistently pointed out what they sometimes call the works-grace divide, a divide that shows up right here at the very beginning of Genesis 4. The argument is this: Cain's offering represents self-determined worship. He decided what to bring. He decided when to bring it. He brought the product of his own effort in the manner that seemed right to him, according to his own evaluation of what was sufficient. He came to God on his own terms. Abel's approach was fundamentally different. Abel came with blood. Abel came with the firstborn, acknowledging priority belongs to God. Abel came with fat portions, giving the best, not the remainder. Abel's offering communicated dependency, acknowledgement of need, and submission to a way of approach he had not invented himself. Now here's a question scholars have wrestled with. How did Abel know to bring a blood sacrifice? The Mosaic law codifying these requirements wouldn't come for centuries. Where did this pattern come from? Look back just one chapter to Genesis 3:21. After the fall, after Adam and Eve had tried to cover themselves with fig leaves, their own self-sufficient solution to their shame, God replaced those coverings with garments made from animal skins. Many scholars read this as more than just a wardrobe upgrade. It was an object lesson. Life had to be taken to cover human failure. Blood was shed. God himself provided what human effort could not. It was, in this reading, a prototype, the very first picture of what it would mean to approach a holy God. If Adam and Eve understood this, and they had every reason to, they would have communicated it to their children. The pattern of approach wasn't arbitrary. It had been modeled, and both brothers knew it. The question was, which one would honor it? That question brings us to the most underread passage in this entire story. And if you've tracked with us so far, this next section is going to change how you read Genesis 4. Most people know that Cain's offering was rejected. Most people know that Cain got angry. Most people know that the murder happened. What most people skim over, or don't even notice, is what happened in between the rejection and the killing, because there's a conversation, and it changes everything. In Genesis chapter 4, 6-7, God comes to Cain directly. He asks him, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast?" Then he says something remarkable. He doesn't condemn Cain. He doesn't write him off. He says, "If you do what is right, will you not be accepted?" Read that again. God is offering Cain a path forward. He's telling him the problem isn't permanent. The door is not closed. Do what is right, which means approach me the right way, with the right posture, and you will be accepted. Then God adds a warning. But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at the door. That phrase, sin is crouching at the door, is one of the most vivid images in the entire book of Genesis. The Hebrew word is robts, rovets, a word that describes a predatory animal pressed low to the ground, coiled, and ready to spring. It's a hunting posture. Sin is being described not as an abstract moral failure, but as a living, waiting predator, and Cain is standing right at the threshold of its attack. God says, "It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." This is an extraordinary moment of divine grace. God has not abandoned Cain. God has come to Cain, explained the situation, offered restoration, and warned him of the danger ahead. Cain has every piece of information he needs to make a different choice, and then Cain invites his brother out to a field and kills him. This detail, the divine conversation before the murder, completely reframes the moral weight of what happens next. The murder doesn't occur in ignorance. It doesn't occur in a moment of blind passion before Cain has had time to think. It occurs after God himself intervened, diagnosed the problem, and offered a way out. Cain's violence is not the act of someone who didn't know better. It's the act of someone who refused to submit, who would rather destroy the brother whose faith exposed his failure than humble himself and approach God differently. The conflict between Cain and Abel was never at its core about jealousy. Jealousy was the symptom. The root was this: Cain believed he should be able to come to God on his own terms, with the product of his own effort, according to his own judgment of what was sufficient. Abel's acceptance demonstrated that this was wrong, and rather than receive that correction, Cain eliminated the evidence. Now here's the part that makes this story far more than an ancient family tragedy. This pattern, self-determined, self-sufficient religion colliding with dependent, grace-oriented faith, doesn't stay in Genesis 4. It becomes a template. Once you see it, you find it echoing through the entire biblical narrative. And the repetitions are not accidental. They are the Bible itself telling you that what started with Cain and Abel has never stopped. Consider Leviticus 10. Aaron has just been consecrated as Israel's high priest. The tabernacle is up. The system for approaching God has been meticulously outlined. Then two of Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, take their censers and offer what the text calls unauthorized fire before the Lord. The Hebrew phrase is literally strange fire, fire he had not commanded. They improvised. They substituted their judgment for God's explicit instruction. They decided that their way of approaching him was acceptable. The result is catastrophic and immediate. Leviticus chapter 10:2. Records that fire came out from before the Lord and consumed them. It's the same argument as Cain. Who decides how we come to God, us or him? Now move forward to 1 Samuel 15. Saul has been sent by God to completely destroy the Amalekites. He wins the battle, but he keeps the best livestock alive. And his stated reason is that he intends to sacrifice them to God at Gilgal. It sounds almost noble. He's bringing offerings. He's honoring God. Except, he was explicitly told not to. The prophet Samuel's response cuts straight through Saul's religious justification. Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. Samuel is saying, Saul, your offering doesn't sanctify your disobedience. Self-determined worship, worship that substitutes your own judgment for God's revealed will, is not acceptable just because it wears religious clothing. It's the Cain problem, dressed up in a king's armor. Now cross into the New Testament and look at Luke 18:9-14. Jesus tells a parable about two worshipers, a Pharisee and a tax collector. Jesus is explicit about whom he has in mind. He tells this parable to people who trusted in themselves that they were righteous. The Pharisee stands and prays, and his prayer is essentially a recitation of his own spiritual accomplishments. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all I get. He is presenting his own performance before God as the basis of his standing. He's bringing the fruit of his own labor and his own disciplines and saying, in effect, this should be enough. The tax collector won't even look up. He beats his breast and says, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. He brings nothing except his need. He acknowledges he has no claim on acceptance except the mercy of God. Jesus says the tax collector went home justified before God, and the Pharisee did not. This is Cain and Abel in first-century Jerusalem. The Pharisee is Cain, approaching God with the product of his effort on his own terms, trusting his own works. The tax collector is Abel, coming with nothing he produced, dependent on a mercy he cannot manufacture. The posture is everything, and Paul draws this out into its fullest theological articulation. In Galatians 2:16, he writes that a person is not justified by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. In Galatians 3:2, he asks the Galatian church directly, "Did you receive the Spirit by observing the law, or by believing what you heard?" Paul's entire argument in Galatians is a sustained, sophisticated version of the same confrontation that began in Genesis 4. The question is structural. What is the basis of your acceptance before God? Your own performance and self-determined religious effort, or trust in what God has provided and revealed? Cain brought what he grew. The Pharisee brought what he fasted and tithed. The Judaizers in Galatia brought their law observance. The argument is identical across 1,500 years of biblical history, and so is the answer. There is something extraordinary about realizing that the first theological dispute in human history is also the central theological dispute of human history. The question that Cain refused to resolve is the question every person eventually has to answer. Will you come to God on His terms, in dependency, in faith, through the provision He has made, or on your terms, presenting your own achievements as sufficient? What Cain and Abel were fighting about wasn't really vegetables versus meat. It was autonomy versus submission, self-sufficiency versus dependency, works versus grace. It was the question of whether you get to define what acceptable worship looks like or whether God does. The Bible's answer is consistent from Genesis to Revelation. God defines the terms, and the provision He has made, ultimately pointing forward through every blood sacrifice to the cross of Christ, is the only basis on which anyone has ever stood before Him in peace. That's what Abel understood, and Cain refused. And Hebrews 11:4 says that because of his faith, Abel still speaks, even though he is dead. He's still speaking in this story. And if you've been approaching God on your terms, trusting in your own spiritual performance, your own effort, your own sense of what you think God should find acceptable, this ancient story from the very beginning of human history is speaking directly to you. The pattern that started in Genesis 4 ends at the cross, where the final and complete provision was made, not by human effort, by grace, on God's terms. And that is an offer that has never been rescinded. If this video helped you see something in Scripture you'd never noticed before, subscribe. We do this kind of deep dive regularly, and there's a lot more hidden in plain sight throughout the Bible. And if you want to go further on this specific topic, we've also covered why the sacrificial system in Leviticus is more theologically layered than most people realize. That video is linked right here. This is Epic Bible Verse. We'll see you in the next episode. May God bless you.